Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101, as always, presented by our good friends over at ScentLok. ScentLok is leaps and bounds the best I've found. I absolutely love their carbon technology for maximum odor absorption. That, and they've got the clothing that gets me all the way through every single season that the Midwest can possibly throw at you. I've got on the phone a special guest, also a guest that is no stranger to ScentLok. I've got Mr. Aaron Ambur, President and CEO of ScentLok. Aaron, how are you, man?
Hey, Dylan, that's a heck of a intro, man. I'm doing great. Happy belated Thanksgiving to you, and thanks for asking me to join to have a conversation with you today.
Absolutely, man. It is always a pleasure to have you on. It's always a pleasure to talk hunting, and I get to live vicariously through you because you seem to have an incredible season thus far.
I like my last post said, sometimes, I feel more lucky than good sometimes, but as you know, in hunting, sometimes luck is what you need to close the deal. So yeah, I've had a really blessed fall and had some luck along the way, and it's been good. I ain't gonna lie, it's been real good.
Now, you're not done yet, are you?
No, I got one more little hunt coming up here. I leave for Iowa on Friday, so I have a gun hunt in Iowa coming up on Saturday, the first gun season, and I've been looking forward to that. I haven't gun hunted in a long time, so looking forward to that coming up soon, Dylan.
I'm 98% bow hunter, 99% bow hunter. And I was the same. I hadn't rifle hunted in a long time. Went home back to Arkansas for Thanksgiving. Had one day and one tag to hunt with my dad there in the Ozarks, and we sat in his tower blinds with rifles, and I had an absolute blast. I'll tell you what though, I kind of felt uncomfortable. Usually switching to a rifle might make a guy be like, man, this is easy. But when you shoot a bow 364 days a year and then you shoot a rifle one day a year, it's kind of intimidating.
Well, yeah, it's been, I started to do the math. I think it's been 20 plus years since I've used a firearm, and I'm gonna try that new 350 Legend, and excited about it. And I hate to say it, but after as many hours as I've logged in a tree stand here with a bow and arrow here the last couple of months, it's going to be kind of nice to have a little equalizer. It'll still be a tough hunt, but looking forward to it. Actually, I think it'll be good.
Yeah, no, it'll be a blast. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Ended up, me and my dad both shot a doe, and just a really fun time, man. My dad calls me. I'm supposed to show up to hunt on Tuesday. He calls me on Saturday, and he had already tagged out both of his bucks, and so he was just sitting there hunting Saturday morning. 3 days before I got there, and he saw an absolute giant. And my dad's the kind of guy that really doesn't get fired up about anything, if I send him a picture of a deer, he's like, yeah, it's a pretty nice deer, man. He's not one to over exaggerate anything. And so when he calls me freaking out, I'm like, this has to be a special deer because this just isn't my dad. And he says, dude, you've got to get here, man. And so that Tuesday morning, we're on the way out to the blind. He's like, man, I just have a feeling. I have a feeling that buck is going to show back up. And I said, well, Dad, it is the rut. The rut takes place a little bit later there in Arkansas. And so I said, Dad, it is the rut. So that deer could be 4 or 5 miles away. And he said, man, I just got a feeling he's going to be there. So we set that morning, and he's part of a hunting club down there. And so one of the members of his church is part of the club, and we meet him on the way in. And good luck, you two guys. Y'all have fun. And we went on our ways. And he's an older gentleman, the guy that we met. And I've known him my whole life, and my dad's been friends with him his whole life. And so we're sitting there and we hear a shot crack off, and my dad says, "Dude, that was Dennis." And 5 seconds later, we hear another shot crack off. And so my dad texts him, says, "Hey man, what'd you shoot?" And didn't hear anything back. And so he started getting a little worried. He's like, "Man, Dennis is the kind of guy that's going to go out and try to drag a deer out himself." And he actually got hurt a year ago trying to do it, and fell and broke his leg, I believe.
Oh.
And so my dad's like, "Man, this is kind of worrying me." And so he tries to call him. He doesn't answer. And so he's like, "Man, I don't want to booger up our hunt, but I'm going to get out and drive the four-wheeler up to check on him." I'm like, "That's fine, Dad. You need to." And so he drives his four-wheeler up, and he drives back a few minutes later. He's like, "Yeah, he said he shot at a big buck, and doesn't think he hit it. Couldn't find anything." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we keep hunting, and it wasn't long before here comes Dennis on his four-wheeler, and he pulls up to the blind. And he says, "Hey, I didn't think I hit it, but I walked off and I found it, and yeah, it's a big buck." And my dad's like, "Okay, well, we'll climb down and we'll come help you pull it out. Don't try to do it yourself." And so we climb down and we're pulling up, and I can see horns in the grass, and I'm like, "Is that him, Dad? Is that the one you're talking about?" He's like, "Nope, don't think so." And giving me high fives or whatever. And we pull up a little closer. My dad says, "Oh crap." And so we had one day to hunt, and that deer ended up getting shot like 600 yards from where we were sitting. And so he said, "I told you he'd be back. He just didn't come back in front of us." But still a great day, man.
Yeah, well, I guess someone was rewarded with a great buck. So it sounds like it's meant to be, right?
Yeah, it was an absolute. It was a tank, man, for Arkansas. I think it probably went 135, maybe 140. Which for Arkansas, that is an absolute tank. It had some great mass, some really cool characteristics in the antlers with some holes going up in the antlers. Just really cool buck.
Oh, amen.
So we went back that evening and held out for a buck as long as we could, but both ended up shooting does. So it was a good time. So
yeah, punch your tag, so that's good, and got some meat for the family, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now it is December 1st. And I'll tell you, Aaron, I get the most question I get about my clothing or my clothing system is about late season, specifically between the new Divergent and the Fortress, and why those are different and kind of how each one would be used. So with it kicking off December 1st, I actually had a guy yesterday morning call me and say, "Hey man, I got to get me a late season suit. Divergent or Fortress?" And I'm like, "Well, why don't you listen to Wednesday's episode and we'll talk about it." So what is the difference between the Divergent and the Fortress, and why one over the other?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dylan, that we get quite often. I will tell you the why in the road. In other words, why you would go left for Fortress or right for Divergent would be more around precipitation than anything. So I hunted the last probably 3 weeks. And it was, I was in Nebraska last week over Thanksgiving, and we were in the single digits in the morning, and it was getting up to mid 30s during the day. And I was wearing the Divergent. I was actually wearing the Divergent top, and I was actually, changing between the Divergent bottoms and the Voyage, as you know, the Voyage pant on the bottom. So the reason that I focused on using the Divergent when I was out in Nebraska is that we didn't have any threat of moisture, and I was trying to ultimately, I was bow hunting, and I was trying to pay off the quietness. So, the Divergent is slightly quieter than the Fortress, and I didn't need a laminated garment, which is waterproof, rainproof, which is really where you'd focus on if you were going to go over to the Fortress side. So I would tell you, if moisture is not a concern and you want ultimate quiet and versatility, definitely go Divergent. If you're like, "Hey, I'm a bib guy," which that's a big difference between Divergent. It's a bib and a parka, and I want that ultimate protection for snow, sleet, rain, and it's a slightly more windproof than the Divergent. I would definitely go with the Fortress. So it really depends. Really, I would say moisture is probably the biggest determinant. And then the other thing I would tell you, if although the Divergent has two side zips and a front zip for a pullover, If you're not a pullover guy or don't want the complexity of that, the Fortress is definitely a zip down parka, a little bit easier to get into, but they're definitely similar, but way different on the application side.
Now, I actually, when I got my Divergent series in, which everybody on the podcast has heard me rave about that series, super warm, very functional. Love the pocket and the layout and the fit. And I actually texted Steve, who, for those of you who have not heard Steve on the podcast before, is the senior marketing director over at ScentLok. And I said, dude, you guys need to come out with every weight of a Divergent series, like a early season Divergent, mid season, late season, because the functionality of it is incredible. I love the layout of that suit. I actually ended up. It's only gotten cold enough twice for me to actually hunt out of it, because it's got to be cold to hunt out of it. You can't go out there in no 30s. You'll sweat. And so it's gotten cold enough twice, and I actually ended up shooting one of the deer out of it. I was wearing it one day when I shot my buck here in Kansas, and I just I love the layout of that suit. So kudos to you guys. I mean, that is a very, very well thought out and designed suit.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. So you think about a lighter weight version of that. I mean, the reason I love Divergent too is to your point about pocket layout. There's nothing better than a kangaroo pocket in your front to put your hands into. A couple hand warmers in there. It's just so comfortable, and your arms in such a natural position. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoy it, because it's definitely the best piece we've ever created. It's the most innovative from just how do we provide that nice kangaroo pocket, yet allow you to get in and out of it okay. A lot of people have tried side zips in the industry, and it's tough on a side zip to actually pull that off. So I'm glad you've had a great experience. I coupled that with the heated vest, which I'm telling you, if any listener that hears this hasn't got one of our heated vests yet, it's a game changer. I was using the heated vest with the Voyage jacket, and when it was really cold mornings, I was putting the heated vest under my Divergent, and it is a game changer with that 20,000 milliamp battery. You can pump the jams, and I'm just to that point, Dylan, where I'd rather be really comfortable than even on the edge of, hey, if a big buck comes through and I might get that chatter going. We've all been there, just with that little extra warmth, man. It just really calms your body, calms your heart rate, and allows you to definitely perform. So yeah, great question on the Divergent versus the Fortress the jackets and pants.
Now the Reactor heated vest that you're talking about there, that's something that you made me super jealous of. We met at Cabela's one day, and you showed me a first run of it, or a prototype of it, and I'm like, holy cow, this is amazing. And man, that thing there serves its purpose and serves it well. I found myself, especially late October, early November, you don't want to go in super heavy. So I found myself hunting in just a base layer and that vest, and being fine up until last light, and then flipping on the heat and being fine. A really well thought out design. And that's why, I always talk about the versatility of ScentLok and being able to get you from 100 degrees all the way down to -10 degrees. And that's what I really look for in a clothing system. I don't want something where, 90% of what they have is early, 90% of what they have is late season. So I'm either hot or I'm cold. And ScentLok really, and these pieces we're talking about are those pieces that serve their purpose so well that you can get through, by changing out a couple pieces, or by changing out a base layer, or by turning on the heat on your vest, or switching between a like you said, the Voyage and the Divergent. You can find yourself not only warm, but comfortable through any sit you're going to go on. And that's what I love about it.
Well, and that's why we call it the toolkit, the BE1 toolkit, because you could be wearing the Trek base layer, which I assume you were wearing. You can match that with a heated vest, the Voyage pant, Voyage jacket, or you can add the Divergent top with the Voyage bottom. I mean, it just has that a la carte-ish options that we believe the technical bow hunter wants, and he can mix and match based upon the conditions he's going to face for that day, and ultimately it delivers the versatility the person needs, the agility. You don't, to your point, you don't want to wear too much, yet you want to have heat when you need it, and you want to have ultimate, that killer instinct in the tree, and knowing that the clothing is going to work with you, not against you. So appreciate you calling that out.
I one more piece, and I'll move on from just raving on ScentLok, but you spoke about the Trek base layer, and that has become it's the softest thing I've ever put on my body. But it really does offer some incredible warmth for not a whole lot of thickness or weight. Me and my wife went to the Razorback game, and it got pretty chilly, and I wore the Trek base layer and my heated vest, and was perfect all game.
Perfect. Yeah, that's. I was getting after my son last week as it was a little cool in our cabin we were in. He's wearing that stuff around. I'm like, take that damn base layer off. Get that recharged. Get that in your scent-proof bag. He's like, Dad, it's so comfortable to wear around here. It keeps you warm. I'm like, well, I need to get you another pair.
That's so funny because I told Steve, I'm like, I think I'm gonna need another pair because this is my everyday pair. Now I need a hunting pair.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you love it. It's got that touch of merino in it, and the fabric's really soft. It's brushed on the back. And it fits well. It's a great piece with a little bit of stretch in it. So I'm glad you've experienced that. We've had a lot of good customer feedback on that, and frankly, in all of our product, the Divergent's flying off the shelf, and Fortress has been strong. So been a good fall for sure. So definitely one of those two pieces or combination of pieces is definitely your strategy for late season.
Now, before we move on, let me give a quick thank you to our friends over at HuntWise. HuntWise is, in my opinion, the best in mapping. Now, you take the maps, and then you can add in the HuntCast, which is phenomenal. That can really tell you what days you should be in the stand, what days, if you need to skip, it's okay to skip. But also, beyond that, they have some incredible deals that you get when you become a member. And on that is ScentLok. So I always tell people, spend the $100 on HuntWise, and you will save your money when you place one order at ScentLok, and saving 30% off because you're a member of HuntWise. So go to huntwise.com. You can use code HUNT101 to get 20% off of your membership to HuntWise, and then I promise you'll make that money back on one order at ScentLok. And again, you got to go to the website. You got to go to huntwise.com to get that discount. You can't get it through the app. So go to the website to activate your membership, because it truly is the best in mapping and hunt predictions that I have found. Then you top it off with discounts to our friends like ScentLok, and it's just phenomenal. Aaron, run me through how many bucks have you shot this year?
Well, I've shot 3 bucks. Last week, I was in Nebraska and took an incredible mid 150s buck. It's always tricky this time of year, Dylan, and part of, I'll make a little bit of segue if you're okay going here, is not only late season tactics as it relates to clothing, but late season tactics as it relates to hunting. And I would tell you, historically, at least in the upper Midwest, Thanksgiving week is always it's always intrigued me, because I watch a lot of cameras, and there'll be bucks that lay down, or the first part of November they'll be in the seek phase, and then they'll have lockdown. And some of those smart bucks, they start reemerging, if you will, that week later, that week before Thanksgiving and the week of Thanksgiving. And I was lucky enough to find one of those late does that hadn't been bred yet, and that was, I think, Tuesday the 23rd, so a couple days before Thanksgiving, which most people say, well, the rut party's kind of over. Well, I'll tell you that the rut party, there's a couple of late stares, and I had a doe, and, it got light about 6:15 in Nebraska, and that was first shooting light. And I had a doe run down a fence line at 9:15 in the morning. And that's, think about that. That's 3 hours after first light. And her mouth was semi-open. I could tell she's being chased. So I grabbed my bow, and she came to kind of the fence line and decided to kind of go towards where my son was sitting. And of course, I'm thinking there's a bucket right after her. And so I waited for about 5 minutes. I was like, doggone it. I really thought that was going to happen. And it, it was 8 or 9 degrees that morning. And by that time, 3 hours later, it was in the low 40s. It was going to be a 70-degree day in Nebraska, which is just incredible. And so about 10 minutes later, I was still standing up, and all of a sudden I heard a "Rrrp, rrrp," and I hears this doggone buck coming down the fence line. And I had a target buck that I'd only seen him on camera once. I've been running cameras, Dylan, for probably 90 days out there, and I'd never seen this buck. First time I'd seen him on camera was actually on the 17th of November, which is 3 days before I got there to start hunting. And I'm like, told my son, I said, AJ, it'll be a miracle if we see him on camera while we're there. It'll be a bigger miracle if we see him on the hoof. It'll be a bigger miracle if we actually get a shot, and it'll be the unbelievable experience if someone's able to take him. And I told my son AJ, I'm like, hey, dude, here's how this works, man. Because the odds are so stacked against you, I'm in kind of a really transient area hunting along a river bottom where they travel to and fro and cover a lot of miles. I said, whoever gets a shot, AJ, I love you. I want you to have it, but I'm telling you, if he comes in front of Dad, he's gonna get it. So this buck, I mean, it's hard shooting a buck when he's rutting anyway, chasing a doe. Remember that doe had a 10-minute head start, and it's unbelievable the nose that those whitetail have. He came kind of not even close to the fence line where she was going to cross and headed the other direction. He kind of did an L-shaped curve, and I went brap, and I went brap, and he stopped. And of course, I was at full draw, Dylan, and got lucky on the distance because things happen so quick, and delivered an arrow, and he went about 10 yards behind a tree and started breathing hard. I'm like, I think I got him, and because it's kind of back entry in front of the back ham, if you will, and entered and then exited out the front shoulder, and I sit there, and all I can see is this buck. I can't see his horns. I can just see his brown body, and he's laid down. And I tried to get another arrow in there, and it hit about 4 or 5 trees and banged, and he didn't move. So I'm like, I think I got him. So I texted my son, and I'm like, AJ, are you clear yet? And it's like 9:30 now. He goes, no, Dad, I got a couple deer. Well, I sat there till 12:15. and finally my son said, Dad, I'm clear now. And I said, AJ, I promise you we'll lay eyes on this buck together first. And I went over to his tree and got him, and came back and showed him where the shot was. And I said, well, you go around and look at him. And he's right behind here. Follow the blood trail. It was 10 yards, literally. I shot him at like 34 yards, and he was at 44 yards. And he goes, Dad, I think you want to see him. So I would just tell you that it's fun when there is some stragglers late in season. And I feel the same way, Dylan, about this weekend. I've killed a couple of giant deer on the 4th and 5th of December, where those does will cycle one more time, the ones that weren't bred. So it's not fast and furious, but definitely there's a little bit of rut that'll still be going on this weekend in the upper Midwest. And then, the try and true strategy, especially where it gets cold, is definitely start to go to food. Everyone's trying to recover. Even that buck I shot, he looked like an old man. He was super chesty with no butt. That it takes a toll on these deer when those bucks are running for 30 plus days, not eating, not sleeping much, and they're chasing does. It takes a toll, but it can still be a late season strategy, whether it's Thanksgiving, which we're past, or this upcoming weekend in December. There's a little bit of rut that can still be going on.
Well, first off, let me say there's nothing like a father's love. Son, I love you, but if that deer comes out, I'm shooting it. I actually, my funny story, my wife, her parents' place here in Kansas, it's never really been worth much. And I've talked this scenario before. I actually talked it over with the HuntWise guys on a recent episode, but this property's never been worth much. And got her a bow this year, got her the Bear Legit, and she decided she wanted to go out and hunt. And I'm like, well, I'll go set you a place up out at your parents' house. It's only 5 acres, but it's surrounded by great hunting ground. And I've always known there's been the potential of having deer. And so when I first married into the family and moved to Kansas, I'd put I'd put a couple cameras up out there, and I'd get some does and a couple small bucks run through, but it's just never been worth hunting. So for 7 years, I've had access to this place, and I've never given it the time of day. So I said, well, baby, I'll go out and put you a place up. And so I went out to her parents' house, and that's beneficial because she can throw the kids inside and grandparents watch them and her go out and hunt. I put a camera out, and like 10 days later, I went and checked it. And I was like, sweetheart, you have like 5 shooters out here. And I don't mean shooters for you. I mean, I would shoot them in a heartbeat. And she was like, what, really? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, giants. And so I started thinking back. I'm like, what has changed about this property? Like what could have caused this property to go crazy like this? And I thought, well, neighbor built a pond that could hold more deer. But that just didn't seem logical to me. And due to the layout of the ground, I won't get into that. But and then I started thinking, I'm like, well, for 7 years that I've been in this family, you guys have had a dog. Well, on 5 acres, if a deer comes on the property, the dog would run out there and run them off. And this is the first year you haven't had a dog. And so this little 5 acres, and their house sits right in the middle of it. I'll send you trail cam pictures. You can see a giant buck in a house right behind them. And so the dog, it's just, they didn't have a dog anymore. And this place has just lit up. It's phenomenal now. And, anyways, I was having a lot of trouble with my place, and I'm like, babe, listen, I love you. But I'm going to go out and hunt your deer. And she so politely said, no, you're not. And I said, okay, well, never mind then. But kind of same is true with your son. Hey, I love you, but I'm going to go shoot those big deer. Difference is she told me no. So, no, I'll tell you, I actually, so I've got one more kind of late season hunt, and I leave next week to go to Liberty Ranch there in Oklahoma. And I was talking to him yesterday. I just called him and said, hey, man, how's it looking? And he said, they're responding still really well. And this was November 29th. And he said they're responding really well to grunts and rattles right now. Mm-hmm. And he said there's still several bucks chasing. And to your point of that late rut and that second rut of sorts, it's almost easier to hunt then than the primary rut, because primary rut, they're just going crazy. I mean, they're just running around chasing does everywhere. And you might see, 3 shooters in a day, but they're running 25 mile an hour past you chasing does. And that second rut is really good, because if you can trick that buck into thinking that there's a doe over here that is late, they'll run to you and then spend more time like looking around for that late doe.
And simply seek, a lot less does that are available to breed. So you got the doe numbers on your side as well.
Yeah. And so I really love that second rut, that late rut, because it just seems a little easier to pin down one of those bucks that is still looking for that doe. Rather than the rut can honestly become frustrating, because I mean, deer are just running everywhere, and your grunts and your rattles and your doe bleats, they're not going to do anything for them because they're on live hot does. But when that buck is still looking around for that one last doe, you hit that bleat, they'll come running, because there are no, they don't have any live does with them. They're not on a hot doe. So if you can trick them into thinking that there is a hot doe, really just a great time to be in the woods. So I'm really excited.
Well, one of the largest bucks I killed, and it was on December 4th, and it was probably 2013, 14, right in there. I actually grunted and bleated him, and he didn't respond, and he was a really nice buck. And I actually snort wheezed him on December 4th, and I got a response. He came right to my tree, and you think about that time of year, they're beat up, they're tired. Yeah, they'll still breed, but the last thing they probably want is a fight. And I know I'm talking about exceptions, Dylan, but at that point, after you grunt and you bleat, and they don't respond, there's one thing you got left, right? That's a snort wheeze. And I don't only do it on a large mature buck, which he was. And to think that, God bless me that day where that son of a gun actually responded to a snort wheeze on December 4th. So anything can happen for sure. And definitely, I think the biggest thing is for people is I think it's all over after all this gun season goes through and they think their bucks kill. I'm telling you, there's bucks that literally live under rocks once, November 1st starts until the guns leave the woods, and they will reemerge. And I would just, to the listenership that's on today, just keep your head in the game, that they're not all shot. There's still some ones hanging around, and it can happen to you for sure.
Now, I even looking past the second rut, even looking past, December 4th, 5th, I love late season hunting, man. I love December 20th. It's dumping snow, it's single digits or negative. Because you can really, and you've already mentioned it, you can pin them down to food very well. Because they're constantly going to food every day. They have to, because like you said, their batteries are depleted, their energy levels are gone, and they're trying to stock back up. And so, if you have a food source in late season, that's almost one of your best times, in my opinion, one of your best times to nail down a buck.
Yeah, I like that deal, and I think they also lay down their weapons a little bit. They'll still be savvy and smart, but I seem to get more daytime pictures late in December. And you're right, they can get predictable. They can get on food and get real predictable, and they're definitely killable. And again, it's kind of like this conversation. You'll see some stuff that you haven't seen. I mean, they just show up. And the other thing I would tell people is that they also change where they hang out. So I've seen bucks that, where my property is, I don't find a lot of sheds. They don't do a lot of wintering, but I've seen places where you won't see any much during the season, but they like to winter there. And so you'll have some potential bucks that move into your property that like to winter there, and it might be close to a food source, and they'll hang out there. You may, I'd say anybody that's got a good shed hunting place is a great place to hunt late season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that for me is the definition of one of my spots. It that they always have winter wheat, and it's laid out in a way where even not just winter wheat, but it's laid out in a way where they have to come through where I'm sitting to get to the wheat. Not have to. I mean, of course they could, do crazy stuff, but they come through where I'm sitting to get to the winter wheat, and it's just, the place is great for rut, but again, they could be running that whole wheat field and, be 80 yards, 90 yards from you, running full speed after does and chasing them back and forth. And but when it comes to winter wheat, they're going to move into that wheat field and they're going to feed. And not only that, but it's colder, and it's harder for a deer to smell you when it's colder. Just like it's harder for you to smell when it's cold, it's harder for the deer to smell when it's cold. Obviously you can still be busted by your scent. I'm not telling you that that's a free for all for your scent. But it's harder for a deer to smell you. Also the pressure is normally higher on those cold winter days. And so again, pressure is higher, pulling your scent up and not sucking it straight down into the field where the deer are feeding. So you can get away with more. It's just like you said, deer are already more relaxed. But now you start to, and deer still have an incredible nose. I'm not saying that either, but you put that cold air into them, and it hinders their nose a little bit, and really it can be a fantastic time to get on a late season buck.
Yeah, well, it's exciting, and hope you have some good luck in Oklahoma. It's another good sleeper state. There are a lot of good things that happen in Oklahoma.
Yeah, there are. I have loved hunting in Oklahoma. I tell people there's not much I love about the state of Oklahoma, especially not the Sooners, but their hunting is phenomenal.
Amen.
Now, what else about your tactics change during the late season? I've got one more thing that I kind of change up during late season, but I'm curious if you have anything else.
Yeah, I just think I probably, I try to hunt more on edges, and try not to get as deep in the woods because they're back and they're embedded. So I really try to hunt a lot of edges, just really not try to disrupt where, they're trying not to work too hard. Those deer don't want to go a long ways off the food source. So I would just tell you that tactic, just hunt edges, hunt carefully. Don't go back in there and start messing things up, because they're not bedded too far from the food source. They want as few steps as they can take to get to their next meal.
Yeah, and one thing I do a lot of in late season, and it's more of a comfort factor, is switch to a ground blind. I don't want to get snow dumped on me. It can stop the frigid cold wind. And so I find myself hunting a lot more out of ground blinds in late season than I do tree stands.
Yeah, smart. And you may not have a trail that's going by your deer stand either, and there may be a place you want to be right in the on the field edge, and you may get a good bush and get in there, and you get the warmth, you get a little bit more scent management even in the ground blind, and you might have to do that to get close to where they're coming out. They may change where they're coming out, and you could be absolutely adaptable like that too.
Now, speaking of ground blinds, I put out a post on my social media not too long ago, and it was about the benefits of a ground blind, and it was about if they're better for concealing movement or better for helping control scent. Now, I will say this: they are more beneficial for controlling your movement. However, the response I got from that post, I think people largely neglect their benefit of scent. Because not a lot of people were talking about their ability to help control scent. They can play a major role in helping you control your scent, a major role. And one thing that I find very beneficial, and Mike from Hardcore Pursuit, we talked about this, is on those days where there's a 3 to 5 mile an hour wind. And just not a lot of wind. If you're in a tree stand, that's going to blow right down and land right in front of your blind or right in front of your tree stand or right behind your tree stand, right where the deer are, essentially. But with a 3 to 5 mile an hour wind, that blind is going to do a great job of stopping your scent. If it is blowing in your face, it's going to do a great job of hitting that back wall and not going through it, not blowing out your other windows or through your zipper or whatever else. But also, if you get a bad wind and it does switch to your back, that 3 to 5 mile an hour wind's not going to penetrate that back wall real well, and you're not going to get a lot of scent blowing through there. So although a blind is best for controlling or for concealing your movement, I believe that a lot of people neglect their ability to help you control your scent.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dylan. It's a big capital AND. It's an and in my situation. I concur with everything you said on any variability, wind, light wind. It just it's like I say, the best thing you can do if you want to have absolute scent control is hunt in a bubble, right? Because nothing will get out of a bubble. Well, the next best opportunity, and I tell this, and I maybe mentioned this on your show, if you got a buddy or a friend or someone that believes in no scent management, you want to take them hunting, I would tell you, put them in a ground blind. You get some benefit to your point by just encapsulating your scent signature within ground blind. Yet some will get out, no doubt about it. But man, you're on a light and variable wind, you're in a pretty good spot.
Especially if you have a dropping pressure. Mark Jury, which congratulations, ScentLok, for getting the juries.
That's a big deal, huh?
Greatest whitetail hunters maybe ever. Maybe ever. But he talked about it. He talked about, on those dropping pressure, low pressure days, don't get in a tree stand because then it's going to just create a mushroom cloud around you of scent. So getting a ground blind and it's dropping right to the ground, right around your feet, and it's going to be contained inside that blind. So again, I know there's several benefits to a ground blind, largely keeping you out of the elements, largely concealing your movement. But a lot of people just neglect that they can really help you with your scent control.
Well, and then and that goes right into elevated blinds as well, on clothes like the banks and the muddies and rednecks. I mean, that's the other thing you're getting on those elevated blinds too, and those are actually sealed up even more than ground blinds. So you get a lot of the same benefit there too.
My dad actually drilled a hole in the bottom of his blind, and he's got a propane tank underneath his blind, underneath his elevated blind, with just a propane hose running through the floor of the blind to his little heater. You've got it made here, my friend.
Absolutely.
Before we move on, let me give another quick thank you to our friends over at Boning. I just today, I've got a buddy coming to hunt with me in Oklahoma, and I had to build him some sticks. And he's actually a champion strongman. So I decided to build him a set of hard-hitting heavy arrows since he's a hard-hitting heavy man. And fletched them up with some boning wraps and a 4-fletch with the heat vanes, and just a phenomenal flying arrow. I went out and shot it. Couldn't shoot it well because he's a 29.5-inch draw, but shot it out of his bow. And I absolutely love boning in all of their products and their Fredbear branded products. They have some incredible Fredbear branded wraps with their Fredbear camo and their Fredbear flannel wraps. So go check out boning for all of your arrow building needs and all of your arrow building components. Aaron, you guys are coming to the ATA show, correct?
Yes, sir, we are. That's coming right up. I think it's sometime in January. I think it's our first week of January, like I think it's the 6th, 7th, and 8th this year.
Just about a month away, and can't wait to get there and spend some time with you guys. I'm excited about ATA this year. Going to be a good show. And what all's coming up for you in 2022? Got any big hunts?
Yeah, I don't have any of the big draws yet. You know, one of the things that I've done for 20 years is I've been putting in for a lot of limited draws. So I'm hoping one of these years I draw a sheep tag in one of the 3 states, and I hope I draw a mountain goat tag or a moose tag. Those are kind of the big lottery tags for me. Outside that, I'll be chasing early season whitetail in Wyoming and South Dakota, and I'll try to do some pronghorn hunting, and then I'll probably do Kansas for whitetail and Nebraska and Illinois. So it'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, you'll have to talk Steve into coming on we're going on a hunt in Texas. We're going on a whitetail hunt with Texas Hunting Resources down there. You'll have to talk him into jumping in the truck with him and coming down. We're gonna have a blast.
No, yeah, I've never hunted Texas before. It's something I've always wanted to do, but just haven't got to it. It just seems like a busy time of year when December comes. And
one of my favorite places to hunt in the world. Speaking of ground blinds, you almost have to have a ground blind.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I mean, you almost have to have a ground blind. There's just, you're in little shrubs and brush and there's no trees. And we actually one year, we knew where the deer were coming. We had them pinned down really well. And I was like, man, I don't want to hunt a blind here. And so we ended up putting a tree stand on a telephone pole, and ended up putting a tree stand on a telephone pole. But you got to get you got to get that redneck ingenuity going when you're in Texas.
Well, and there's just so much diversity in Texas, and I mean, there's some giant whitetails in Texas. You can be hunting the east side of the state and see one topography, or the west side or the south. There's just so much going on in Texas, so it's a great resource. Probably, I know a lot of guys go there. I just haven't taken the opportunity to go there. So it sounds like an exciting trip.
Yeah, you'll have to tell Steve, hey, listen, I'm going with you.
For sure.
No, it'll be a good time. Before we go, you've been on the show before. You know what I'm going to ask you. What's a tip or trick you've got for me that'll make me a better hunter?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I'm going to bring up from my Nebraska trip, and I know better, but sometimes you just don't do better. And if you recall, when I was telling the story about that doe running down the fence line, and I was in a great spot where typically does that run down a fence line or deer, they like to cross the fence right in front of me and come into a thicket where I sit, where there's a good doe bedding area. And normally I have the fence tied, so I have the top wire and that next wire tied together so they cross easier there. And most importantly, so I don't touch that spot. And you may have listeners that say, "Well, you dummy, you shouldn't cross that place where that trail is." But I have to. It's really thick back in there, and I actually have to cross the trail. And I've never had an issue with my rubber boots. I cross that fence line and kind of duck in, and I get out of the way. The other fence line on the left and right just have grown up brush, and there's no other way in there. And I made because I didn't have the fence tied up, I actually crossed that fence that morning with my hand, and I had a glove on, so make no mistake, I was had a glove on. I pushed down on that wire, hopped over the fence, got my tree stand, and she didn't do anything when she's come down that fence line, which I walked down with my rubber boots, or she wasn't smelling the ground. She smelled that wire, that barbed wire that I had placed my glove on, And it was just enough where she said, nah, I'm just going to go this other direction. And luck, had she crossed that fence line, that buck would have crossed the fence line right in front of me, but she didn't. And obviously the story worked out. But that'd be my tip of the day, is just, you know, it's early in the morning, haste makes waste. And then I knew better, but I was like, you know what? I'm probably okay. Well, that could have cost me a great opportunity. Luckily, it worked out for me. So that would be what I tell people, is wherever they're, try to stay off the trail with your rubber boot, but don't think for a second it was ScentLok glove or not ScentLok glove. Touching things, they're very smart, and it was just enough for her to go the other direction. So that'd be my tip. Just, don't overlook things that you normally not do on a day-to-day basis, so that it worked out, but it could have cost me something.
Speaking of rubber boots, I've always been a preacher of rubber boots, but you, when we were at Cabela's, you actually said something to me that's changed my mind on boots. And you were talking about a full rubber boot and not, a neoprene upper or something like that. And ever since then, every time I go to grab my boots, there's been times where I went to grab the Alpha Burley Pro or whatever, and they've got the neoprene upper, and I'm like, nope. Aaron Ambur said all rubber. And I found myself, deer don't walk across my path anymore and stop and bolt. I have truly taken your tip on boots and applied it.
Yeah, well, that's good, Dill. I mean, definitely if you're not in grass, the rubber clad on the bottom of the boot's still good. But if you have any brush or any grass, that neoprene on the top of your boot, that will absorb scent. And it's no different with a pant. If you're in tall grass, just got to keep your arms up, and because that grass will hit, an article of your clothing or the top of a rubber boot where you maybe have got a transfer scent on there. They'll pick it up. So it's full clad rubber boot is what you need, and it keeps everything as good a shape as you can be.
Now, to your point about touching stuff, Cuz Strickland there from Mossy Oak, he talks about imagining yourself covered in orange paint. And when you get to your tree stand, look back, and everywhere you've touched or walked or set or, set your bow down or touched a fence, you can see all the orange. And your goal is to get there without any orange on the ground. Or on fences or trees or creek crossings or whatever, is to get there with the least amount of orange paint left that you can, because everywhere you've left orange paint, you've left scent. And so he really, when you think about it like that, it becomes pretty easy. Like if you truly climb up in your stand and look back and you're like, oh crap, like I touched there, I set down there, I set my bow there, I set my bag there, whatever. When you think about it like that, it becomes easy to understand how much scent you're really leaving behind.
That's a great visual perspective, said like Cuz stated it to you, because you can kind of see that immediately in your mind, that visual of all those orange marks, and I hate going down trails. I really do, even with rubber boots, but I found sometimes being quiet and not touching every other piece, if you will, of tall brush going in there, sometimes it's the lesser of all evils. But it's really smart to the degree you can stay off the trail far enough where you're not being too loud. But if it's tough getting in there, sometimes you have to take the trail, but just try not to touch things. Try to keep tall grass off you. And for many deer, it doesn't matter. But I'll tell you, for the right deer, they pick up on it. So I think that's a great visual perspective that Cuz relayed to you.
Cuz actually, I don't want to say he pioneered it, because who knows who did. But, he says he'll take a rake in, preseason, and then, November 4th or 5th after a lot of leaves have fallen, and he'll actually rake his path out to get to his stand. That way it is quiet.
Smart.
So, which, I mean, you're looking at Cuz Strickland, a wealth of knowledge. And so you take everything he says and you hold on to it. But, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And, I am you guys know I'm a huge fan of ScentLok, and I'm a huge fan of Aaron Ambur.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thanks for the time today, and hopefully this was informative for your listenership base. And again, my biggest thing, guys, just keep your head in the game, and it can still happen. And you may have struck out to this point in the season, but there's a couple, let's call it 5 weeks left in the year, or 4 weeks for a lot of people, and can still happen. So good luck to everyone, and thanks again, Dylan, for having me on the call today. And thanks for everyone's support our brand, and it means a lot when it comes from your lips as well, Dylan.
Absolutely. Well, before we go, let me give a quick thank you to our friends over at Archery. They're your one-stop shop for all traditional quivers. Whether you're shooting a longbow, recurve, or self-bow, they have the best, in my opinion, the best quivers for any traditional bow. And I actually just recently got my Kodiak Hunter in the mail, which is a gray glass bow. And I'm like, man, I got to make this a Razorback themed bow. And so Selway made me a custom quiver with the Razorback branded on the hood. Just a gorgeous quiver. So go check out Selway Archery for all of your quivers. By the way, I also put out a challenge on naming that bow, the Razorback bow. And I have went with a name submitted by Arrow Junkie on Instagram, and the name of that bow is going to be Tusk. So go check out my Instagram to get reviews and set up videos of the new Bear Archery Kodiak Hunter, which I have so named Tusk. Guys, thanks for listening. You guys have a great week. And remember, as me and Aaron talked about, it is approaching late season, and that can be your best time to nail down a big buck. So don't give up. Get out there in the woods. Good luck, and as always, send me those success photos because I love to share and celebrate in your success.